What's up, guys, and welcome back to another video. I'm really excited for today's video because I'm going to be telling 5 scary stories I found on Reddit and other websites. This is something I've never done before. It's really not, and I think it's going to be something interesting for sure. You're not going to be able to sleep tonight, maybe. I don't know. Probably. Anyway, let's get to it. I'm excited. The chair. When my sister Betsy and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring its dusty corners, climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost we called Mother. She seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings, Betsy and I would wake up. On each of our nightstands, we'd find a cup that had not been there the night before. Mother had left them, worried we'd get thirsty during the night. She just wanted to take care of us. Among the home's original furnishings, there was an antique wooden chair. We kept it against the back wall of the living room whenever we were preoccupied watching TV or playing a video game. Mother would inch that chair forward across the room towards us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, long after we'd moved out, I found an old newspaper article about the farmhouse's original occupant, a widow. She'd murdered her 2 children by giving them a cup of poisoned milk before bed. She then hung herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse's living room, with the woman's body hanging from a beam. Beneath her, knocked over, was the wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room. The following. I lived with my sister for about 3 months. Weird stuff happened in that time. My sister would say to me when I mentioned a ghost that it didn't like me being there. Things like going to bed with everything locked up and switched off, and waking up in the morning with the back door open, lights on, and the kettle switched on. One night, my sister and I were going to go out, and I asked to borrow her liquid foundation. I used it and put it back where she'd kept her makeup. 10 minutes later, she was asking for it, and it was nowhere to be seen. She accused me of taking it and made me buy her a new one, and refused to listen to my side of the story. About a year later, when she was packing to move to a new house, she found the makeup in a shoebox with some old letters. The shoebox was zipped up in a suitcase that was hidden underneath her bed. But the most scared thing that ever happened to me in there, I had arrived home early, which never really happened much, staying home, because we lived with 4 other people. I arrived home from work and headed straight up to the bathroom. All doors, windows, etc. were closed. I was standing in the bathroom and started squeezing a pimple on my chin when a female voice down the hall said, "Stop picking your zits." It was loud enough and sounded real enough. At the time, I thought it was my sister, so I laughed and told her to fuck off, and asked what she was doing for dinner. No answer. I stuck my head out in the hall. There was no one out there. I searched the house top to bottom, and no one home. I sat on the front porch until someone else got home, because I didn't want to be in there alone. This new old house. We bought an old house, my boyfriend and I. He's in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom. For instance, while I'm on wallpaper removal duty, the previous owner nearly papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it was brutal, but oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel, similar to your skin when you're peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kinda made a game of peeling on the hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner section of the paper in every room is a person's name and date. Curiosity got the best of me one night. I googled one of the names and discovered the person was actually a missing person. The missing date matched under the wallpaper. The next day, I made a list of all the names and dates. Sure enough, each name was a missing person, with dates to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out the crime scene team. I overheard one text say, "Yup, it's human." Human? What's human? Ma'am, where is the material you removed from the walls already? This isn't wallpaper you were removing. It's skin. An invitation. This happened almost 10 years ago now. I was in high school, the summer before my senior year. It was your typical angsty teen. Couldn't wait to get out of the burbs and go to college. I got a job at a big movie theater in my town. It wasn't too bad. I sold tickets, manned the concession stand. The best part of the job was getting to see all the movies for free. I would come even on my off days and see whatever was playing. Didn't have many friends back then, so this was a great way to kill time and not focus on my lack of social life. I worked the early shift on most weekdays and got to know the matinee crowd. Mostly it was older folks who complained about the stale popcorn. Pro tip, popcorn in the morning was just from last night. It was during one of those shifts I met Brian. He stood out. He was younger, maybe late 30s, handsome. He came several times a week and saw almost as many movies as me, always carrying a sketch pad into the theater with them. He was always friendly with me. After one of my shifts, I popped into the theater to catch the second half of some CGI movie. On my way out, I ran into Brian. He asked what I thought of the movie, and we started talking. Maybe 10 minutes of the conversation, I asked about the sketchpad. He told me he was an illustrator of children's books, and he was taking some time off between projects. I asked to see some of his work. He nervously showed me what he was sketching during the movie. They were hysterical. He put the cartoon characters in bizarre, dark situations. I told him I loved them, and he said he would show me more. From then on, Brian came in more often. Seeing him was the best part of my shift. I would tell him what movie to see and ask for specific drawings. The darker the better. My favorite one had the rat from Ratatouille cooking his human friend and serving him to guests. I could tell he loved showing them to me. I know our friendship could sound sketchy, what with him being an older guy and me being a high school student, but I really felt like we were just two awkward people that clicked. He treated me like an adult and never did anything inappropriate. One day, towards the end of summer, Brian came in and I was working the evening shift, and we were all really busy, so I didn't get to talk to him much before he went into the movie. A group of girls from my high school came up to the concession. Their leader, Michelle, she was the most popular, pretty, athletic school girl. On top of that, she was really nice, and I hated her at the time, but looking back, it was obviously just jealousy. I don't blame anybody for not wanting to be friends with me, given my shitty attitude. When they came to the counter, I panicked and hid. I called over my coworker, and he took care of them. Later on, Brian came to see me after the movie got out. He said he saw me run away from those girls. I was so embarrassed that he saw that, I panicked. I made up an excuse. Those are just the mean girls at school. They try to make my life hell. I don't really care. I just didn't want to deal with it today. I lied. Brian got very serious. More serious than I had ever seen him. He told me, "Don't worry, bullies always get what's coming to them." Brian didn't come over the next few days. I was a bit relieved, because I know how stupid I acted last time. One evening, I came home from work, and Mom told me I received a large letter. Probably an information packet from a college. I opened it, found a sketchbook, immediately recognized it as the same type Brian always carries. Before I opened it, I started thinking, how weird was this? How did he know where I live? If he wanted to show me his drawings, why not do it in person, like always? I flipped to the first page, which had the words, "An invitation," in big, fancy font. The next page showed a young girl tied to a chair. It was Michelle. She looked terrified. All of Brian's drawings, even the most gory ones, were whimsical and cartoonish. This was photorealistic. Two dark figures unmasked approached her. They pulled out knives. I couldn't keep turning the pages. It was stomach churning. Did he think I would like this? Is this a joke? I forced myself to keep reading, looking for answers, until I reached the horrible end. After Michelle was long since dead, the two figures removed their masks. They revealed to me and Brian. The last page just said, RSVP, sir. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. The next day, I tore up the book and threw it out in the dumpster. I went to work like nothing happened. I waited in the dread of the day for Brian to come in, but he never did. The next week, I was working the ticket counter and saw him approaching from the parking lot. I froze before he opened the door. He stared at me. I was petrified. I felt all the blood draining from my face. After what felt like minutes, he shook his head, turned around, walked away, and I never saw him again. 2 weeks later, I found out Michelle went missing. Escape. The rain was falling heavily. It was like driving through a thick curtain of water. I eased off the accelerator a little bit. Had to be careful driving on wild nights like these. The last thing you wanted to do was have an accident or breakdown. You just want to be at home on these stormy nights. The thwack of the windscreen wipers was hypnotic. He stared out the glow of the headlights. The rain sounded like white noise interference as it battered the car. I was reminded of the opening scenes of a Hitchcock film. Through the wash and rain, I spotted a figure on the side of the road. The person wore a green parka and had their thumb jerked out. Why on earth would anybody be hitchhiking tonight? Surely you would just stay put until morning. They must have been in a rush to get somewhere quick. He signaled me down and I pulled over. The hitchhiker climbed in. He shut the door quickly. Glad to be out of the rain, he pulled his hood back and sighed. He was somewhere in his mid-20s and had wild red hair, like a thick beard. Awful night, eh? Said the driver. The hitchhiker held his gaze for a long moment. Drops of rainwater trickled from his face. Yes, yes it is. The driver pulled out and continued through the storm. The hitchhiker glanced over his shoulder into the blankness behind him. You okay? The hitchhiker simply nodded. They drove in silence for a short while, the BBC radio phone blaring out of the car speakers filled for conversation. They listened to the radio. Their thoughts moved on. Where you headed? Asked the driver. North, the hitchhiker pointed. Are you traveling to visit friends? The driver couldn't tell if that was a yes or a no. He adjusted his tie nervously. The hitchhiker stared at him for a minute. The hitchhiker seemed scruffy in comparison in his parka and Pink Floyd t-shirt. You work around here? Asked the hitchhiker. Yes, said the driver. I was stuck late in the office. You know how it is. No, not really. They drifted into silence. The talk show radio came on as they drove through the wind and rain. The hitchhiker shifted in his seat and stared out the windscreen. No music, the hitchhiker said. What? Is there no music we could listen to? I like the talk show radios. I'm not much of a fan of music. The hitchhiker's eyes glared over for a moment. Then he spoke. I like listening to music. It calms me down. The driver said nothing. Several miles later, there was a bulletin on the radio. The reporter tried to remain as professional as she read the announcement. We're getting reports that a patient has escaped Manchester Psychiatric Institution. The man is said to be psychotic and is said to have a history of murder. The hitchhiker jammed his finger into the button of the radio panel. Tiny pop music blurted out from the speakers. The driver stared at his passenger. his question unasked. "I hate the news," said the hitchhiker. "It's so depressing. There's never any good news, is there?" The driver did not reply. "Don't worry, I'm not the killer," said the hitchhiker, fidgeting with his coat. "No," said the driver. "I mean, no, of course you're not." They drove on, listening to the crappy pop music. Overexcited radio DJs pounded on the car. "What do you do for a living?" asked the driver. The hitchhiker was quiet for a moment. Then he grinned. "I'm a writer." "Really? How interesting. Have you had anything published?" "Not of yet. I'm an undiscovered artist." "I'm sure you will make it. What are you working on at the moment?" "I'm writing a novel." "Yes. It's about a serial killer." The driver did not speak. He flicked the talk radio station back on. It was a man rambling on with himself about the change in his days. "Where can I drop you?" asked the driver. The hitchhiker said nothing. When the driver glanced around, his passenger had his eyes closed. I believe he was asleep. They drove through the storm, down the snaking lines. An hour later, the storm growled and raged. The hitchhiker looked out of the window. The driver steered the car in silence. Another news bulletin came over the radio. "We're getting information that the escaped patient, the killer's name is Simon Hughes. He escaped from the Green Pastures Institute earlier this evening. He's extremely dangerous and completely unpredictable. Simon made his escape by changing from his hospital issue uniform into a suit and tie, pretending to be one of the medical staff. He stole a car and drove off." The hitchhiker turned to the driver. "What did you say your name was?" The driver replies, "My name is Simon." The hitchhiker stared in shock. Simon grinned. The headlights of a passing car glinted off the knife blade in Simon's hands. Thanks again, guys, for watching. That was a really fun and unique video to do. I have 3 more episodes planned for this kind of Halloween special, and I will definitely see you in the next one, or at least I hope to see you in the next one. Bye. Adios.